G'day viewers, in this tutorial we're going to take the ES44, or actually 3 of them, down the 3% grade after Cajon Pass. So we've come up from Hesperia, we've headed all the way up the hill, up our 1.6 or so % gradient, and this big radio mast on the left here tells me that I need to start getting ready to go down the other side because we're almost at the crest of the summit. So as we start coming up here, I'm gradually going to start notching back because I want to bring our speed back to about 20 miles an hour. Not in a hurry, we've got a little while to go yet, but our gradient's going to drop off from this 1.5 down to about 0.1 very quickly. You can see it's already dropping down now. Even feel it. Now remember, the back of our train's still coming up that 1.6% that we were just on, so you want to keep powering for a little while even though the gradient's almost flat now. Let gravity do its job. When you come over the crest at the summit, you want to be doing no more than about 20 mile an hour. Anywhere around 18 to 20 is probably pretty good. Pretty much holding our own with the speed in notch 4. It's drifting up and down a little bit. You can just sort of see it. These telegraph poles coming up on the left, which in the early days of this line would have carried literally hundreds of wires, or each individual telegraph being wired to the next point. Today they wouldn't carry nearly as many. So as we come round this corner, we should soon come in sight of the signals up at the summit. We are still going a bit quick, so I'm just going to drop it down to notch 2. So at this point the back of our train's probably getting onto the shallower gradient, so gravity's not helping as much. There's our signals for the crest up there. So now I'm coming off the power completely. And I'm going to put the dynamics in setup, even though we're still going uphill. Because I am still actually going a little bit quick too. Dynamics have been in setup long enough, so I'll pop them up. Let's just take them up to 2 or 3 for the moment, because I do want to slow us down a little bit before we start getting over the hill. You can hear the dynamics revving up now. Basically, dynamic brakes reverse the concept of the traction motors. Instead of being motors, they're generators, so they start generating electricity, and that goes up into resistor grids up in the blister up on the back here. That's what this funny thing is in the back of the locomotive is. And you've got your dynamic brake grids up there. Some trains have radiators up there as well. So we're coming down to about 20 now. So I'm just going to pull back a bit on the dynamics, because this is about where I want to be. Now we are still travelling uphill at the moment, but that's going to change pretty soon. But it's worth remembering that as the locomotives come over the crest and start heading down the gradient, the back of the train's still going uphill, so you don't want to get too carried away at the moment with putting on your braking effort. I'm liking where I'm sitting here with the dynamics on 2. Still slowing down a little bit, but not much. As we pass these signals, you'll see that the gradient will change to a down gradient. There it goes. And we're now going to head down the other side of Cajon Pass, down towards San Bernardino, a suburb of Los Angeles. And this is where it starts getting tricky, because you look at that gradient and you think 0.6%, that's not much. Well, we're going to go down the roller coaster, and it's 3%. So you don't want to be going too quick down there. I'm pretty happy with where I am at the moment, 15 mile an hour, 16 on the loco, 15 on the HUD. It's just, one's rounding up, the other one's rounding down probably. So I'm going to leave this. You'd be tempted to change it. Don't. Just let it slow down. If it slows down a bit more, so be it. It's fine. Now, dynamic brakes tend to lose effectiveness down below about 5 mile an hour, and this locomotive will actually start to cut them out. So to get down to 3%, we will most likely be using dynamics and the air brakes. When you apply the air brakes, it's very important to bail your locomotive off, or the dynamics will cut out. So this train hasn't got any rear power units, but if it did, it's very important to have banking com on so that it copies the bail off to the back locomotives. So in this game, they're not really distributed power units or DPU. They're literally a copy of the other loco. So it copies your movements as though they've got a crew sitting in them. It's more akin to you saying, front engineer to rear engineer, I've put the dynamics in 2, they're revving. And that'll let the guy down the back know he's doing that. And then you might say, I'm applying the brake. And he'll do the same thing down there. Now, in reality, they wouldn't actually apply the brake. Now, you can see up here the gradient's about to come down and get really, really steep. So let's start getting ready for that. So you can actually see where it drops. And lucky us, get the steeper road. Notice the speed limit's now dropped to 30 as well. So I want to gradually start bringing up the dynamics because I don't want to stop us, but I also want to be in a good position as we go down the really steep part. So the locomotives will hit the steep part first, obviously, but they are very heavy. Now remember, at this point the back of our train is still going uphill. It won't have come over the summit yet. So even though we're going into a 2% down gradient now, just keeping an eye on the speed. Now this might seem overly cautious. You might be able to get down here a little bit quicker. But you want to be careful doing that because you can go from being slightly out of control to upside down pretty quick. So we're starting to pick up some speed now. So I'm going to go up another notch on the dynamics. Keep an eye on the speed. We're probably going to creep up again. It's one area where the HUD's more useful than the train display, because on the HUD you can actually see the creeping, because you can see the individual pixels drawing on the line as it gradually creeps up. Because you won't see it on the train display until it's actually gone up a number like it just did. So more of our trains in the steep part now. I think it's time to go for another notch. And if we have a look at the back of our train, there we go. All right, it's in the 0.1 still, or it's probably in the 0.6 here. So it's only going to get worse from here. And if you're wondering why it goes to the title screen, it's just because the train's so long it has to change tiles, so it has to reload it. All right, I'm going to go the whole hog now. Now the dynamics alone probably won't be enough to maintain our speed once we're all in the steep bit. For now, probably are. It might even slow us down a little bit. but I will sooner or later have to put in some air, or take some out. It's actually the case. And we can see the back of our train up there with the last cars drawing. See, there's still drawing, so it looks like the end of the train's up there, but it's not. It's still coming around the corner. It's only the draw distance that's stopping us seeing all of it. Actually, no, it might all be there now, so the whole train's about to come into the steep part. And you notice we have lost a little bit of speed since I put it into notch 8 on the dynamics. We will probably pick that up again shortly. Back of the trains just can't pass the signals up there. So let's go back in our cab and stay here now. So we've just picked up a mile an hour. Because we were showing 15 before, we're now showing 16. Heading up to 17. So I'll let it creep up to about 22 mile an hour. And then I'll put on some air. And I'll let that come back down to about 16 mile an hour, and then I'll release it. Probably about 18, 17, 16, somewhere around there. The brakes are actually quite good on these trains. The implementation is the best one yet, the most realistic. And they do take a bit of getting used to. The scenery here is just very spectacular. I really love the mist in the distance and the way they've managed the very high desert conditions. I've actually been up here and this is pretty much what it looks like. Amazingly, even in this dry environment, there's still actually a lot of wildlife. So if you ever visit this area, just sit down and be still for a while. Probably need to do that anyway because it's hot. Alright, we're getting to the point that I'm going to put it in a minimum application and I'm bailing off the independent. So you'll see our brake pipe is dropping a little, but our brake cylinder started to go up and then come down again. If you don't bail off the independent, so you bail off your locomotive brakes, the dynamic brakes will cut out and then you'll have nothing but air. And then you'll be sad. I think we're starting to creep back down now. So I'll maintain this minimum set for a while. The back of the train probably hasn't even applied yet. Looking at the display, it's only just gotten down to 83 at the back. So we came down from, what, 90 odd, I think. Minimum set, 7 pounds, that makes sense. And you see we are losing speed, so 18 mile an hour, I'll release. Brake pipe will pump back up to 90 pretty quickly up the front, but the rear's going to take a little while to come up. So the brakes will actually stay on for a while at the back. It's starting to come up now. We've got 84, 85. So the brakes down the back are probably releasing now. So we've got to keep an eye on our speed. We'll let it come back up to 22 or so. And then we'll take another bite out of it. When you're using this method, it's called the Sawtooth Method. You apply, release, release. But it's very important to keep the brakes released long enough that the back of the train actually comes back up to pressure, and it almost has. Because if you don't, it's called pissing away the air. And after a while, you won't be able to apply the brakes anymore. Because if you exhaust the air in your auxiliary reservoirs on each car without recharging them, you get to the point eventually where the auxiliary pressure just equals atmospheric pressure and you just can't apply them anymore. On American trains, you get one more crack with the emergency brake after your normal applications don't work. It's quite different to what you get on the European trains and the newer Australian trains, where the brakes are actually applied electrically. So they're still done with air, but the air provides the pressure, the control is done with electrics. That's called electro-pneumatic braking. We're creeping back up again now. You may recall some documentaries about some fairly spectacular wrecks coming down out of Cajon Pass. That last curve at San Bernardino takes them out. We're almost back up to 22 now. We're getting there. 22 on the loco. And we are pretty much pumped up at the back. We're up to 88. So I'm going to go for another minimum application and bail off my locomotive. Speed is starting to come back down. So we sit here in our locomotive, shaking our fist at gravity. Go on, gravity. I have to say the dynamics in the ES44C4 are the best sounding ones we've got in the game. Alright, time to release. Busy day on the highway up ahead. Heard our compressor go whoop, so it's pumping us back up. You can see it's pumping up the main res back up to 135, 138, 137, 136. See, since we released it, the speed is starting to creep back up again. That's where the person over there would be calling out, "Hey, you're creeping. You know you're creeping." Now you might ask, why don't you just put on the air brakes and leave them on for the whole trip? And the answer is you'd melt them. They're either a cast iron block on a steel wheel or a composite block on a steel wheel. You melt the brake blocks, it just gets so hot. And you could end up, if you make the wheels really hot as well, setting fire to the grease in your axle boxes. down to a 2% gradient now, so the locomotives are on the 2%. The train's still coming down that near 3 though. It's time to take another bite. We are almost charged up at the back, so it's maybe a little early, but I have to do it because we're picking up speed too fast. So the rear had only reached 87 pounds that time, so it had not fully recharged. But if I let it run for another minute to let it come back up to 88, it would have got out of control. To see the rear of train, it's this bottom box here, which is currently showing 83. These are the two you're watching, brake pipe and the rear. You won't have to worry about your main or your equalising too much. You can just let them be. I'm going to drop it down to 15 this time because and released, because we're on the 3% gradient, so I need that little bit longer to charge them up. See the brake pipe at the front's come up pretty much straight away. The rear's gradually coming up. 84, 85. Should see an 86 soon. But holding it to 15 was worthwhile because we went right down to 12 mile an hour before we started creeping back up again. So it'll give the back of the train a little bit longer to pump up. But you'll also notice we're 5,000 feet from a higher speed limit, so we'll be coming off the gradient soon anyway. It's often said in railways or railroads, depending on where you come from, that getting a train up a hill is easy. Getting it down the hill is where the skill is. You'll notice as we came up towards the crest there, I started mentioning landmarks. As you get to know your route, you'll pick places where you need to do things, and you'll pick places where you need to be doing certain speeds or you need to take some sort of action, and you'll always do it at that place. It can vary a little bit from day to day depending on the weather. So if you're in snow, for example, you might want to come down here a bit slower, because you might run into a spot where you've got no traction at all because there's ice on the rails. And you'll need a bit of leeway to recover from that. We're about a mile away from this change to 45 mile an hour, and then I'll quite happily let the train creep up a bit more, because the curves aren't as tight, gradients aren't as steep. gotta say, these trees are just cool. Spiky little demon trees. From here on out, we'll probably hold our own with just the dynamics now. We probably won't need to apply the air again. But you still want to behave as though you're going to need to, because you never know what might come around the corner. Alrighty, well, we've just run over about 26 minutes for this tutorial, which is probably long enough for people to watch it. You certainly get the idea. I'll continue this practice down here for the rest of the run. And yeah, if you liked it, if it helped you, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Plenty more where these came from. Have a look at my playlist. There's a whole lot of other TSW3 tutorials that you may find useful. And even if you think you know it from TSW2, the trains are a bit different this time. There's been some really, really significant work done on the physics. The brakes on these trains on Cajon Pass work totally differently to the brakes of all the previous generations. And every generation of route, they've gotten better. And these are probably the most realistic that is actually possible with this simulation method. Alrighty, well, catch you later. See ya.